Aloha mai kako, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's HLA Next Steps program. Before we launch into today's program, I would just like to remind you about our October Next Steps program, which will feature Lopaka Kapanui on October 16th. He will be telling us strange tales of Hawaii. He's a storyteller who specializes in ghost stories. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I hope that you all can join us for that. And so today it's our pleasure to have Ellen-Rae Cachola, who is the HLA Vice President, President-elect, and she's also the Librarian and Digital Archivist at the Center for Labor, Education, and Research located at UH West Oahu. Ellen was previously at the UH Manoa Law Library as their archives manager, and she has her MLIS from UH, and she also have a PhD, I think, in ethnic studies. Maybe you can fill us in on that. So I'm very happy to have Ellen here with us today, and take it away, Ellen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gwen. Hi, everybody. Hello, friends and colleagues. It's so great to see you. Thank you for joining today. So just to correct, I had my PhD from UCLA Information Studies program, but thank you so much, Gwen, for the introduction. So, hi, as Gwen had mentioned, I'm Ellen-Rae Cachola, the Librarian and Digital Archivist at the Center for Labor, Education, and Research. I'll share my slides now, and hopefully you can see them. Please feel free to make a noise if you have something to say, but I will have time at the end for questions. So please feel free to save them then. So I want to thank HLA Next Steps for allowing me to share to my librarian colleagues about what I have been doing since I transitioned from the law library to CLEAR. And I've been working here for the past 2 months. So this is a very special library and archive and center. So I'm very excited to share what I'm learning. I just want to have a disclaimer that anything that I say here that may be incorrect is my responsibility and not of CLEAR. I am still in the process of learning a lot. So thank you for your grace, and just feel free to ask questions as I am still also trying to learn all the details of, the collection and the center and the education that we do. So my presentation today will share the historical and educational significance of the CLEAR collections, providing an overview of the types of materials we have, how to access them, and sample archival and library materials within an abbreviated context of how I am currently understanding Hawaii labor history. And so the last part will be about why labor education is relevant today. So as Gwen mentioned, the CLEAR Library and Archive is located at the James and Campbell Library at UH West Oahu campus on the second floor. And the collection is composed of a library, which is in our lobby. And this is an alcove sort of around the corner, but this is various monographs and serials about US and Hawaii labor historical topics, as well as labor union publications. We also have a labor law reference library, which is more visible when you walk into our center. And it's mostly a lot of texts on Hawaii and federal legal volumes and serials related to workers' issues, workers' compensation, employment trends, occupational health and safety, wages and hours, labor arbitration reports, fair employment practices, decisions of the Federal Labor Relations Authority, among many other types. So to be honest, I'm still processing a lot of this. My goal is to catalog half of them are not yet cataloged. So we're just going to have that to be my next semester project. But really what I've been sort of digging my toes into is the archives. And this is a picture of our archives room, which is a separate room that's adjacent to our center lobby. And this is a climate-controlled archive room that holds print, picture, and ephemera related to US and Hawaii labor history, union records, arbitration records, and various special books. We also have digital repositories like Here we have an audiovisual VHS and DVD collection of Rice and Roses, which is something that CLEAR has produced back in the 80s and the 90s to educate the public through public television about Hawaii's plantation and labor history. And so a lot of those materials have been digitized for preservation, and we collaborate with Ulu Ulu, the audiovisual archive downstairs at the Campbell Library. And so they preserve our film, and they've also digitized some of the footage for access through Ulu Ulu's Recollect database. And we also have some of our streaming documentaries on YouTube because that one provides more of the full kind of user access. Ulu Ulu does provide snippets and stuff of the footage, but sometimes it takes a lot of time to get to the live streaming. So there's a lot of steps there. So our faculty have put some of the documentaries on YouTube. So just Google us at Center for Labor Education and Research YouTube. We also have some Rice and Roses documentaries available at the UH System catalog. So if you want to look up the 1946 Great Sugar Strike, you might find you will see an item record to a video streaming digitized version of that documentary and many other CLEAR documentaries. I think those were digitized again when we had the Wong Audiovisual Library, and they had worked with CLEAR back in those days. And so we also have this DSpace, which is our open access repository that we're slowly populating with some of our open access print material. And so as you can tell, my collection is very much multimedia and it is spread across multiple places. And so at this point, I just use a LibGuide to help educate and raise awareness to our students and our colleagues and the public about the subject level items that they might find in our collection. And it's a metadata search tool, so it's not super fancy. I don't have a lot of digitized images yet, but this is mostly text metadata regarding the title of items and their location. So it kind of helps me do a search based on a topic, and then I can find the location, and then I can, give it to the patron either in person through visits or through digitized version as an email, and I scan it for them. So as building a lot of the collections that we have not been digitized. We're still working on doing that, getting a grant to support digitization tools, archival supplies, and a better digital preservation space. So if we are going to move towards a digital archive, so we're kind of writing a grant for that. And so when I just started, this collection was pretty much, there was a inventory that Dr. Pewitt had left behind, but he had retired. And so there was a couple of years when no one was working in the archive and people were still just donating materials. So when I started, I had to organize the physical space to create a working environment for me and a student worker. And so we moved some of the books that were in the archives room into the alcove and into the reference library so that more space could be had for those lots of boxes that were on the floor and on tables and unhoused papers that were on file cabinets. So I had to create a work plan to sort of open up space, clear space, and then create a processing procedure to find the locations for all of these unhoused materials, start doing the inventory and updating the one that we had inherited. And so, yeah, there's a lot of project management going on with, focusing on one part of this collection. The next semester, the library and getting those cataloged and setting up a circulation desk at CLEAR. Right now, a lot of our materials are only available through appointment. And so I've had a couple of researchers come by already, so that's been nice. I'm also working on archival and library policies to define donation, user, and loaning policies, especially to balance our statewide mandate to provide labor education in Hawaii with our current staff capacity and storage space. So it's kind of trying to find that nice balance where we want to have a nice reach, but I also have to be conscious of our infrastructure and the limitations of that and our capacity. So it's been sort of trying to find that sweet spot. And then I'm also learning about how to be flexible to the university, union, and public audiences. So there's a lot of that navigation that I'm figuring out. So this LibGuide will take you to, so just to kind of give you a sense, like this union's A&M, if you come to guides.westoahu.hawaii.edu/clear, you can see that we have file cabinets for all of these different unions, as well as collections of John Reineke and other people, union philosophies, which I will talk a little bit more in my presentation, but this is a good way to sort of start and get a sense of what we have and our policies on access, which is basically messaging me and scheduling a time to come in. So the significance of this collection. So in my study of the Clear collection, I basically am trying to understand it as a knowledge system, a framework or structure that organizes, stores, and shares information and understanding within a specific context, whether for an individual, an organization, or even a broader societal system. So CLEAR was created by a Hawaii state legislature statute in 1975 to be a statewide clearinghouse for labor education. People like former lawyer and arbitrator Bob Hasegawa, and then people like Dr. William Puett and other faculty were involved in educating unionized workers while also providing credit courses for students. So union records were bestowed to CLEAR as part of their commitment to supporting labor education in the state. So CLEAR educates contracts on things like contracts, grievances, union organizing, collective bargaining. What is union stewardship? What does it mean to be a union representation? What does leadership look like? What is US and Hawaii labor history? What is US and Hawaii labor law? So we have a lot of courses that are around those themes. And so the archival materials were collected and built to create and communicate this research out of the former director's agendas and plans. Okay. So I like this map of Waipahu history, which was created from this book on the left by Lani Nedbalek, and it's about Waipahu's kind of plantation history, but it also includes some mo'olelo of various locations in Waipahu. So this kind of represents something that I'm interested because it mixes the Kanaka Maoli place names of Waipahu as the land was being transformed for plantation industry. And so this collection preserves and provides access to Hawaii's working class histories from the Hawaiian Kingdom, which is from 1835 onward, territory period, and the U.S. statehood era. So this collection includes indigenous immigrant workers' experience in the workplace from I told you the time periods, also the strikes that they've engaged in, union organizing and correspondence between unions and organizers, worker education materials, arbitrations, news clippings, media coverage from various points in these time periods, but as also industrialists and employer council reports, pay scale ledgers, infrastructure reports from in the territory to the statehood era, the transit history, the hotels history, and the costs of operating these industries and infrastructure over time. There's also court cases and, like I mentioned, materials on Hawaii and federal laws that the faculty would use to sort of educate the unions about their rights. And so Dr. Puett, Ed Beechard, and Bernard Stern were authors that were affiliated with, Dr. Puett was the director here, but he had also colleagues that were researching and writing books, such as the Hilo Massacre, Aloha Trade, Routledge Unionism, the Clear Guide to Hawaii Labor History. So these are all actually open access on our website, and I've also created a copy on DSpace because we're currently migrating our current website, which is considered our old website, and we're trying to build our new WordPress website. So there's a lot of transition going on there, but Dr. Puett has made these books open access, but also we do have physical copies that are potentially available for sale. But there's a lot of bureaucratic things that we're still working on for the purchasing and the, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, these books are available. So The territory plantations and democratic worker organizing. So the first plantation was in Koloa, Kauai, and the Native Hawaiians were the first workers. They were paid in plantation store scripts, and they did not like the plantation work because they knew how to grow their own food and the work was quite difficult. So these workers walked off the job. But eventually, plantation owners started to import workers from other countries, which is why we have different immigrants with genealogies from Asia, the Pacific, Europe, the United States, and other parts of the world whose genealogy was connected to coming to work in Hawaii's dominant industries during the time period of the kingdom, territory, and statehood. And so bango tags were something that the plantation owners used to identify workers' identity and pay them differently according to race. So at the time, the work was difficult and exploitation was common. So workers initially organized strikes based on their ethnic group because they could talk to each other in their language, or according to specific camps because they lived next to each other. But eventually, Kanaka Maoli Chinese workers like Harry Kamoku learned about interracial organizing. He brought it from his experience working in the California docks, and then he brought that knowledge to Hilo docks. And this is how the early ILWU, or the International Longshore Workers Union, was formed. So you can watch the story of Harry Kamoku and the early formation of ILWU in Clear's documentary, Brothers Under the Skin. So this is one of the Rice and Roses production that Clear had produced back in the 80s. So take a look at that if you have a nice, want to have a date night on a Friday or Saturday and have a nice TV documentary to watch. So anyway, Clear also has papers of the ILWU as among the unions, just to show an example of the kind of correspondences, the speeches, research reports, news clippings, and how these materials were used by Dr. Puet to write books like The Hilo Massacre, which was again during this era of forming the ILWU. And so US labor strikes led to the National Labor Relations Act, especially in the continental United States. And so collective bargaining was made legal there. But when Hawaii workers, we had a relationship to the US continent because the longshore workers, we were on the Hawaii side of the shipping line. And so of course, workers on the California and Hawaii, they would talk. And so the continental workers told the Hawaii workers like, hey, we have this new law and now we can collectively bargain. But when the Hawaii workers found out, a lot of this rights was only for people in private industries, and it did not include agricultural workers. And so Hawaii workers said, hey, we would like an NLRA, but we would like it also to include agricultural workers because at the time that was the big industry. And so through the workers organizing, through RWU, but also other unions that were also in existence at the time, they had demanded the Hawaii Employment Relations Act, which is also nicknamed the Little Wagner Act. Oops, did I happen to my slides? Sorry. There it is. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that, my slides. So that's just the history of how we got collective bargaining in Hawaii as a result of interracial organizing to get all the workers in different parts of the plantation industry, the docks, the factories, the fields, to support the shared demand of collective bargaining rights. And so democratic organizing was a really important part of this methodology of organizing, which was focusing at the rank and file level of the workplace in order to build and drive these union organizing in this time period of the territory era. And so there was a lot of work to build inclusive participation of all ethnic groups and that required undoing the ethnic, class, and gender divisions previously imposed by the plantation owners to keep the workers unorganized. So I want to also encourage folks to watch Aquan McElrath, The Struggle Never Ends, a recent Clear production that is to be screened on PBS and is also on YouTube right now that talks about her role as a woman leader in a largely patriarchal labor union. It documents the work she did reaching the rank and file workers for health and basic education services, eventually building that trust between workers and the union organization so that these workers would become the backbone of the large strikes of 1946 and to support the democratic revolution in the later years. So post-World War II to the Cold War. So 1946, the Great Sugar Strike. It shuts down 33 plantations across Hawaii to make plantation owners listen to the workers' demands. And then there's a lot of help and support that's coming from workers, especially the veterans coming home from World War II, and they join the unions. And so these are the types of strikes and organizing that's happening. This was also the time of the Cold War. And so US Senator McCarthy led a federal backlash against labor organizers, red baiting them as communists, which painted them as enemies and traitors of the United States. And this was also the time of the global proxy wars. The US sought a global capitalist order, while other nations, such as the Soviet Union or even in Vietnam, had movements to create different political economic orders to support their national development. And so these kind of movements of different political ideologies and the ones that were sort of thinking critically to capitalism, those other ones were thinking of as was labeled as communism. And so Hawaii was one site where labor organizers were targeted. John and Aiko Reinecke, and we have the papers of John Reinecke. Koji Ariyoshi was part of the Hawaii Seven, and he was the editor of the Honolulu Record, which we have the physical copy as well as digitized versions on DSpace. There was Jack Hall, who was the ILWU leader, and we have some mention of him in our archives. Charles and Eileen Fujimoto, Jack Kimuro, and Jim Freeman. So these were people that were arrested as communists and traitors of the United States for supporting working class concerns. And they were called the Hawaii Seven. And they were represented by labor lawyer Harriet Boslog's firm. And their charges were overturned eventually as the case went up higher into court system. And so this was a major kind of rallying point and the sort of, I feel, a kind of time when the working class movement was suppressed and it kind of created a lot of fear to think about these issues of organizing ourselves as workers and because of the blacklisting that was happening. And it affected people's comfort with, what does it mean to organize for our workers' rights? And I think it affected Hawaii's working class very much. But anyway, after that time, there was a democratic revolution movement that emerged because the labor movement saw the exploitation of the working class was also enforced by the industry-dominated political leadership in the territorial government. So the labor movement strategy was to increase political participation of Hawaii's working class into government. Plantation worker descendants were encouraged to run for government positions at the territory and then statehood levels, and then eventually at the US congressional level. And the palaka cloth was an important symbol for these political candidates, Democratic candidates, linking their slate in the Democratic Party to the labor history and community, and the reason why they were kind of bringing these working class values into Hawaii's government and our relationship with the United States. And so when these labor movements, they had a lot of impact on the corporate agricultural economy. The labor movement challenged the agricultural corporations by requesting that they pay better wages and improve the working conditions for the working class. But this also pushed agricultural corporations to leave Hawaii, at least like Dole Plantation would leave Hawaii because it was adding more costs to their operations. So Dole went to, Philippines or to Latin America because they didn't have these labor laws and environmental concerns. And so there was a concern about what is Hawaii's new economy going to be then? And so Hawaii political leaders usher in tourism as the new industry to hire and employ Hawaii's people. And so CLEAR has material on unions that we might see today, such as the ones on your left. But these example unions, founded very much earlier, which was surprising for me to learn. But it shows like how, a lot of these unions represent the kind of industries that were in Hawaii and the trades opportunities of the workers and how these workers helped shape and drive the industries of the past and present and the transitions that they had to go through. And some new things I am learning about union history in this post National Labor Relations Act era are the different union philosophies. And I'm sure that maybe it's not necessarily post NLRA. And like I said before, there were many other unions other than LWU. And you have to understand that unions are diverse. They're like multiple communities with different perspectives based on union leadership. But there are just two that I'm kind of looking at now. And labor management relations is one type of union philosophy. It's a legal framework that came out of the NLRA, where union representatives engage with the employer to determine the union membership contracts. And so people like Bernard Stern, he wrote Rutledge Unionism in '86, and the Aloha Trade, which is discussing the labor management relations in the early years of the hotel worker industry. And another type of union philosophy that exists is union democracy, where rank and file workers are educated and organized from the bottom up to drive the union contract and goals. So I put these Local 5 flyers to show some visuals of their campaign ideas and the values of these organizing in this, according to this democratic principle, in our current tourism economy. And so one story I wanted to share too is like Local 5, they started off as a kind of a labor management relations union because Rutledge was the founder of HERE, the Hotel Employers Restaurant Workers Union. But there was major transitions in values in the formation of Local 5 here. And so in the recent leadership under people like Eric Gill and others, they started to shift toward democratic union principles. And so one of their union presidents was a Filipino housekeeper named Gemma Weinstein. So she came from the rank and file, and then she ended up helping to drive the union recently, actually. So why is labor history and education important today? Neoliberal economy entails the increasing privatization of public goods to create individualistic demands according to the market. This type of economic conditions can lead to identitarianism, where advocacies are fragmented around certain identity group demands. We may see this in the form of polarizing discourses or exclusive discourses within theories of change. But our public institutions and infrastructures that are supposed to support all of us, especially the most vulnerable across our identities, our public goods and services are being privatized and increasingly inaccessible for large swaths of the population. There's issues of defunding of education and libraries. There's a cutting of funds that support library services, and there's a privatizing of information services such as AI, these new trends with AI. These are the things that we might see in our industry of education and librarianship and information. So what can we learn from labor history in terms of the methods of engaging and empowering the agency of diverse working people to defend our dignity on the job, to participate democratically in society? Democratic meaning allowing for inclusive and empowering participation so that our institutions and organizations can allow different voices to shape the consensus of our direction. How can we ensure public goods and services are protected? Public goods and services are public goods are services and infrastructures that are provided by the government and funded by tax dollars. What can our labor history and knowledge systems teach us about relationship building, intercultural communication, and cross-sector organization building? Why is labor history and education important today? So thank you to HLA for this space to share. I am the CLEAR Librarian and Digital Archivist. I am interested in collaborating with other archivists and librarians on grant projects to facilitate public history and public memory projects. As someone growing up in Hawaii, I never really knew a lot about our labor history. I knew that we came from labor in terms of my family and my community, but the details of it, I did not really get a chance to study. I would mostly read books, right? Excerpts from things that have already been published. But there's a lot of detail in the Clear collection that I think has not really been shared in our public school system, or even in just general community discussions about what happened in the territory era and what are unions. I've personally, and then someone has, grown up in Hawaii and have been able to work in Hawaii, I've always felt that gap. And so there's just a lot here that I think I would love to engage with other collections, because I can already see the connections with other collections like the Law Library, with Hawaiian Pacific history, but like how this particular collection speaks to this, other sort of unspoken elephant in the room. So I'm interested also because of the values that are in this archive and in the work that they've done in terms of what it means to be an information worker today and the conditions that we face and the advocacies that we do. Uh, there are other opportunities for learning is that CLEAR offers the Labor Studies Certificate to complement undergraduate and graduate majors, non-credit courses for professionals and students offered through UH Outreach College for professional development of workers, unions, and the general public. And we also provide internship, practicum, and student job opportunities. And then also, I think why is it important for labor education is to understand where we are now and how to move forward. How does our labor histories teach us why we are the way we are today? Why is Hawaii's population the way it is? Why do we have certain jobs and industries? How can we self-determine what we want for our economy and livelihoods now and into the future? How can we update our understanding of what it means to be a working person in today's political economic climate? Thank you very much for listening. If you have questions, let's chat. Otherwise, contact me at ellenrae@hawaii.edu. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Ellen. Thank you so much for that overview of CLEAR's activities and collections and the work that is still has to be done. Does anybody in the audience have any questions? Dawn.
Question. Ellen, great presentation. Thank you so much. What kinds of collections have been coming into CLEAR recently, and what kinds of collections are you looking to collect?
So the collections that I've been told that it's on my radar to write a grant for is the Rutledge Estate Collection, which Arthur Rutledge, again, who was the founder here, Hotel Employers Union, Employees and Restaurant Workers Union. And so that's one that we are kind of still getting the deed of gift prepared for. And then Local 5 is one too, because there's a James Chalk diaries. So James Chalk was part of the here union, but part of the rank and file. And there was, again, differences in perspectives about how the union should function. And so James Chalk would bring these criticisms to Arthur Rutledge. And so it was that diaries of how James Chalk believed we should organize. And it was different from Arthur Rutledge's style. So like that, and this, the reason why we're taking in this collection is because of this grant that I'm telling you folks about that I'm writing. And the grant was already in conception before I even came on board. So that's pretty much the first two collections that I know that I'm supposed to prepare space for. And then we also have some boxes that are not yet in the archives room, and they're in my director's office, and they're arbitration records from the 40s to the 80s. And these are from various arbitration lawyers for Hawaii workers' cases in the public and private sector. And these come from the Industrial Resource Center that Joyce Nahita, she had, and then the center closed. And so she was giving away these boxes and see if anyone would preserve it. And so CLEAR ended up taking those boxes. And so that's why we haven't processed it yet. So the thing about accepting collections is like, I'm really trying to plan a sustainable archives program, because if you have a statewide mandate, I would imagine like you would have a big building like our state archives, right? But we have a little room and we have a lobby, and I've been trying to plan for digital archives, and that's what my digital archives title is. And so, giving that the kind of physical space is limited, I do want to build it out by having shelves in our archives room and perhaps taking another office for the other stuff, but um, also building out external vendor relationships to digital preservation, like Internet Archive, Vault, or AWS is another one that Ulu Ulu has mentioned. And, so planning for that and getting funding for those kinds of things. I've been meeting a lot with West Oahu IT to also think about our digitization working files, like when we scan and, having that help too. And work and also talking with West Oahu librarians, because I'm not the only unit that needs to have a digital preservation support. So talking with Alfie, talking with Janelle, and like I really want to have like a good like librarians team where we're talking about it, because the infrastructure is not just for me, right? It should be West Oahu Library. It should really be investing in digital preservation space. So we have DSpace, like I mentioned, as the potential curator, but this is only for open access. So that's limited, right? If you have the rights to do it, then sure. But if you don't, you have a lot of information that is still not yet there. So a collection management system is something that we need to set up. So we have archive space, and I'm still needing the time to populate that. But we're also looking at Omeka S, and we looked at Manoa's instance as a model in terms of the space that it takes on their server, the virtual servers, and all that. So, these are the things that I just talked about with colleagues this week. So when I talk about acquisition, I'm also talking about, do we have the space and capacity? And so what is the balance, right? But we could collect a lot because there's unions across Hawaii and they're constantly creating records. So policies about that. What exactly are we going to collect from them? And I'm working with the faculty director to help clarify, because it's a lot of also managing expectations to because a lot of the things that we have collected are like collective bargaining agreements. And something that I've learned is that for public unions, that can be available online and stuff. But for private unions, it's more secret, or it has to be under wraps because, internal record kind of thing. So, having to consult with unions about their collections and how much the access restrictions they would want. Something that I have to work on. We also have news clippings, but that comes just to collecting newspapers or media. Um, we've, but unions have also donated research material to CLEAR in the past because they trusted the entity. So reports and other types of union correspondence and things like that. But in the current union landscape, the only unions that have a library is ILWU. And so there's a ton more smaller unions that don't have libraries and archives. And one of my goals and one of my idea for sustainable archiving is to teach unions how do you archive your own stuff. Because I feel like I can't do it for them because my space is not big, and so I can offer digital curation of open access material. So, these kind of things I have to educate my staff, my team about.
Oh, thanks, Ellen. Do you want to stop sharing your slides just so we can
Oh, sorry, I didn't know that.
see each other a little better?
There you go. Sorry about that.
So you kind of touched on this answer to this question already, because I was curious about CLEAR's relations with other labor-oriented libraries and archives like the Industrial Relations Center, which you mentioned that you have all these arbitration records from them, and as well as the ILWU library. But it sounds like, in terms of IRC, they just donated some material to you, but I don't know how much collaboration there was between IRC and CLEAR in the past.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the history of labor archives and libraries would itself be a really interesting topic for somebody to write about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so that's one thing that I'm learning. Like I told you folks at the beginning, everything I say is wrong, it's my fault. Because I'm just there's a lot of textual information I can study all day, but there's like invisible information, the union cultures. And I think it's again because of the persecution of the 50s that some unions have become very closed and they're only specific to their members. And so, there's that, but we are a public library and archive too. So there's some things that I've learned about balancing, like not to take sides or not to favor a specific union, but to be open for all unions to learn, so things like that, I think, is not written. And it's just things that to learn, about public services when serving a specific group of people like unions. The cultures, are very unique and they all have their own territories and things too, competitions and stuff. So yeah, I'd love to talk to the political archivists here in terms of like managing those kind of relationships. So yeah.
Other questions?
Well, it's really interesting. It's not something that I had really thought about before either. There was a big protest with all the unions a few months back, and they're not all on the same side of the political divide, and that was surprising to me. So I can see how navigating this space is going to be interesting.
It's one
Little
of the hard
fiefdoms.
things. It's like a hard, recognition of like, oh, I didn't know, like, okay, like you didn't know. But yeah, so the work with the federal strike, the federal workers with that big strike that happened on May 1st, I remember that one too. And yeah, like you said, it's the relationship building between unions is also very process oriented and yeah.
Yeah, that protest was supposed to be a silent one because nobody could agree on anything. It's quite interesting. Silent march.
Yes. That's a good one. So thanks for your comment, Malia, about the Imoto murals. So we do have an Imoto mural in our lobby. It was at the First Wine Bank. So what is your story with the mural?
Well, Isami Enomoto was the owner of Ceramics Hawaii for decades. And so all the local ceramic artists knew him. And when Charlot worked on monumental ceramic murals and sculptures, they collaborated on projects. So there was this strong friendship there. He actually did the ceramic works for the ones at the UPW building on School Street.
That's interesting.
So we have a small file on him, and I'm in touch with his son.
Okay. Nice. Maybe I can meet up with you sometime and chat about our murals.
Yeah,
And labor
they're really
history.
cool. Actually, Dakamomo Hawaii is a local mid-century modern. They're a local chapter of an international organization, and they the ones that spearheaded the effort and fundraised and stored those murals to save them from the bank building and found a place to put them, and they worked with Mr. Good to
Yes, so that's the one that we
find
have.
that perfect spot. Yeah, so they got a national award for that initiative, and yeah, so we probably have a little bit on that, but John Williams was the one that led that effort.
Cool. Thank you for that detail. It's great to know that you have also some information about it too.
Does anybody else have any questions?
So when is
There's a question in the chat. There's a question in the chat from Dong Hyun Kim, and it says, "Do you have a collection related to foreign workers who worked in Hawaii as foreigners, not immigrants?"
Good question. You mean like to be just like temporary contract workers that would go back?
It
Yeah.
says yes.
Oh, okay. I think because I don't know if the inventory has labeled things as foreign workers and there is immigrant, I mean the term that I saw in our inventory. But if you look at the stories of these groups, so we have from Japan, Philippine, Pacific Island, a couple of files on that. Um, Puerto Rican. Anyway, so if you look at those files, maybe there might be information that shows the contracts and the movement of people. I know I do have um boxes of Bureau of Statistics by HSPS, kind of like the collection at BYUH, the Filipino Laborers Collection. Like we have a set of those too. And these cards show when the workers came into Hawaii and came out of Hawaii. So so I guess that's the movement of them as contract workers. They're not settling, but they're just kind of coming to work for a period of time and then leaving. I hope that interests, that answers your question.
Yeah, I think also at the state archives in the various governor's papers, there are some records related to the different groups that were brought into Hawaii to be laborers. Even after the kingdom period in the territorial days, the governors of Hawaii were working with the congressional leaders to enable people to come to Hawaii as laborers. And they were
Yes.
also working on trying to change immigration laws so that the immigrants could become citizens and therefore voters.
Yes. Yes. That's a really good context there, Gwen. Um, yeah, I would love to talk to you more about the government part of the history of that. The changes that happened with the NLRA and how immigrant rights changed too, and workers' rights. I mean, I don't know if that rings a bell for you and what you have.
Yeah, there are so many different aspects to labor in Hawaii that, I'm sure Dr. Puett had all of this in his mind, but the rest of us do not.
Yes, he did. He did.
Yeah.
So Dr. Puett, I did not start when he was here. He was already retired and he's kind of in his elder years, so it's difficult to meet with him. I kept asking him about things and he's unable to meet with me, but um it's like that. It's kind of like me kind of like trying to make sense with the traces of things that are behind and asking people, and so that's why it's a lot of learning, but it's a lot of interesting stuff to learn too. So
Yeah. And in the chat, Dongyun also said, that makes sense. I'm wondering if your archive manages international labor history as well.
there's some, yeah. So we have the IWW, International World of Workers. I forgot the acronym what it means, but we also have um I remember seeing a file cabinet about international workers. It's unions in other countries kind of thing. And because of the connections that they were trying to make with the various immigrant and working class in Hawaii, um, I just have to do a search on that LibGuide and hopefully that can give us some pieces to then, look around for things.
Yeah, and I'll mention that the UH Manoa Library also has a number of international labor organization documents. So some of that covers international labor unions and labor migration and that sort of thing.
Mm.
So Dongyun said, I will search in the LibGuide as well. Thank you. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Either unmute or put them in the chat.
I have a related question to the different ethnic groups. Um, do you collect materials in other languages as well? Like if you have things related to the different ethnic groups for the labor movement.
Yeah, I think I've seen a couple of Japanese material. Um, but it's not like a huge collection or anything. It was just part of a file cabinet on Japanese immigration. And it seemed like a contemporary poster. It seemed like Dr. Puett was just he collects. He used to collect as he researched. So there was a poster about a Japanese museum that he in I forgot what town in Japan he was looking at it, but it was in Japanese language. But there might be more, but I haven't super identified it yet.
Thank you.
Sounds like we need a field trip out there.
Yes, please come. I would love to do a field trip and host you folks and just to see, because it's not a typical archive with shelves and acid-free boxes. These are just series of file cabinets. I do have boxes and they're like sprinkled in different places, but so it's not super big of a collection. It's like file cabinets by subject. So anyway, I would love to have you guys come by. And then Jessica is asking, would you be willing to do an education and training session for HDEA? I am Unit 13 steward. Oh yeah, I mean, what the process for that is to ask my director, Dizon, that you would like to request that the librarian and archivist do a presentation for HDEA so that it's like the chain of command thing. So Jessica, just feel free to email me and we can plan out that message to Dion.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, does anybody else have any questions? I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. I don't see anybody with their hand up. So I think that brings us to the end of today's session, but I would like to say mahalo nui loa to Ellen for her wonderful presentation. That was fascinating, and it's delightful to learn about CLEAR and the work that it does and the work that you are doing with the archives there. So mahalo, and thanks to everybody for attending, and I look forward to seeing you at another Next Steps event. Ahui ho.
Thank you. Bye.